How you doing today, folks? This is going to be part 2 of a video where I just filmed a video going over some of the big picture concepts with the berm behind me. What I want to do now, and this video is really more targeted at my clients, but maybe you folks can learn something as well, is just walk you through and tell you a little bit about how to care for the plants in the video. So I'm just going to pick up the camera, walk around, and we'll see how this goes. So the mulch we ended up using for this garden is pure hemlock bark. And I really like that pure hemlock. It's very fine textured mulch. It's got the bark of the tree. It's the best mulch in my opinion. When we install gardens, we put the mulch deep enough that you should not have to mulch next year. In the spring, you may want to get a pitchfork or a tool called a garden weasel and just stir that mulch up. I did that yesterday before I filmed. After 2 years, so not next year, but the year after, you are going to want to top dress this garden with mulch. But the key is you never want to have more than 3 inches of mulch in the gardens. 2 to 3 inches is the ideal amount. More than 3 inches is actually too much and it's going to suffocate the plants. The tree in the back of this garden, the large tree right there, that is a Yoshino cherry. That's going to grow to be about 30 to 40 feet tall. It's going to have pink flowers in the spring and it's a very fast grower. It's going to really, get up there pretty quickly. The only pruning you're going to need to do on that tree is if one of the branches is rubbing into another branch, possibly there's a branch that's hitting you in the head when you're mowing the lawn, but it's a fairly low maintenance tree. This is an ivory halo dogwood. It's got the variegated foliage. It's going to look really nice through the summer, and then in the winter, if you take a look at the twigs there, they're going to be red through the winter. And this is really a nice touch when there's a lot of snow on the ground. Now these guys you can pretty much let be for 2 or 3 years until they get to be about 4 feet tall or so. And then once they get there, you can just take your hand pruners and reach in the shrub, and you want to basically every year just prune out a little bit of the older wood. After 2 or 3 years, maybe prune out 1 of every 3 branches. They say to prune 1/3 of the branches at a time. And you just want to thin it out a bit because the newer branches are going to have a nice red color. So if you don't prune it, it's going to kind of, get a little bit more bland looking in the winter. Over the summer, if a branch doesn't look right, you can certainly come through and, cut it back a bit. But this shrub here, you're going to want to use your hand pruners, not your clippers or hedge trimmers. This is a limelight hydrangea, and this is a very aggressive growing shrub. It'll easily grow to be 5 to 6 feet tall in another 3 to 4 years. If you want to control the height, you can certainly cut it down shorter. Limelight is going to bloom on the current season's growth, so you can prune it a little bit in the spring as well. With hydrangeas, what I usually recommend is once all the leaves fall off in the fall, go through and cut all these dead flowers off, or you could even, if the flowers don't look nice anymore in the fall, you could come through and cut these flowers off, again with your pruning shears. But in the winter, cut all the dead flowers off, reach into the shrub. You're going to want to kind of thin it out a bit. You're going to want to prune any branches that are rubbing together. You're going to want to make sure that there's no branches growing back into the center of the shrub. And just open the shrub up a bit. This right here is Mount Airy Fothergilla. This is going to grow to be about 4 to 5 feet tall, and it'll slowly sucker from the base. And if you take a look, you can see these here. These are actually next year's flowers starting to form. So you really don't want to prune Fothergilla later in the season. I barely ever end up having to prune Fothergilla. It's going to have, in the early spring, it's going to have bottle brush white flowers. And then in the fall, all this really nice, elegant foliage is going to have different colors. You can see it's starting to get some now, with reds, oranges, and yellow. It's just a really beautiful shrub with multi-season interest because it's got the spring bloom and then the fall color. Again, no hedge clippers with this guy. I mean, just occasionally you might have like one branch kind of coming off. So over the summer you can nip it off a little bit, but you shouldn't have to do much for this shrub. And then as time goes by, you'll probably notice it starts to sucker out from the base. This is fairy candles. These guys in the fall, once they're done blooming, they're going to start to kind of lose their foliage. And a couple times through the season, you know, if you notice that some of the leaves are starting to brown out a bit, you can just cut them off. But once these flowers fade away and the frost comes, you basically just come to the base of the plant and just cut it right back to the ground, and it'll just regrow next year. There really is no other maintenance, and it's a very deer resistant, and I think it's a pretty cool flower. These flowers look very similar to a Fothergilla, just the Fothergilla's a little bit bigger and a little bit more rounder. This is a purple coneflower. There's two different things you can do for maintaining coneflowers. As the season progresses, once the flowers start to fade away, they can look a little bit ratty looking or unkempt. What you can do then is bring your pruners in and just cut off the stalks with the flowers that don't look so good. And by cutting off the flowers that don't look so good, you're actually encouraging the purple coneflower to get more blooms. And then what you'll do is once the frost comes, again, you'll just take your hand pruners and you'll just cut the whole plant. You'll cut the whole plant down right to the ground. And then it'll just regrow in the spring. Now this right here is Astilbe Visions. And this has a nice pink flower in mid-spring, and you can see the flowers are fairly low to the ground. It's only going to be about a foot tall. Once this plant finishes blooming, you can just go ahead and cut off all the flowers. And the reason you want to cut those flowers off is because you want to encourage the plant to put its energy towards the nice foliage as opposed to producing seed. So you'll just go through the garden with your hand pruners, clip off the flowers. These, I guess somebody missed at the nursery. And you can see here, these ones here have already been pruned off. Just go through, clip off all the flowers, and it'll have this nice clean foliage and look much better for next year. And as the year progresses, you know, if you're out in the yard and the garden, the mulch is starting to fade away a bit, you know, don't be afraid of taking either a pitchfork or a tool called a garden weasel and just run it over that mulch. You know, you can do it 2 or 3 times a year if you want. And it'll fluff the mulch, it'll break it up, and it'll just make it have a nice, little bit of a darker color. So I hope that helped. If anybody's watching on YouTube, feel free to post some questions below. And if you're my client, feel free to give me a call or send an email. Thanks a lot, folks.